Good afternoon. When I was first asked to speak here, I didn't know exactly what I would talk about. Cancer brings on all kinds of emotions, but it took me right back to the very initial point. I remember sitting in a doctor's office, and the doctor looking across at myself and my wife, and she told us, she said, "You have cancer and it's terminal." And at that point in time, I felt very alone. The room was all to myself. I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't know how to process such information. I didn't know how to go home and regurgitate that information to my children. How do I explain that? But it was during this process, and I realized that my future was going to be completely changed. And as I went through surgeries, chemo, radiation, all kinds of new drugs, new experiments, things that I'm going to do, things that I've never done before, I began to educate myself. What is going on? How did this happen? But the one question I never decided I would ask was why. It wasn't up to me why. It is now what do I do with it? And as I educated myself, I found out a lot of information. Through research, we were able to find out that cancer has been an epidemic in the fire service for over 30 years. One of the very first cancer presumption law was founded in 1982 by the state of California. This is information that was already out there. The medical research has been backing cancer in the fire service since the early 1990s. Some of the great minds in America have known about this. Yet, unfortunately, here in the great state of Ohio, we have not jumped on board with that yet. That is what we are attempting to do now. As we look through cancer, we know that statistics don't lie, and that's what we live on. As firemen, that's what we practice on. And as we know, from 2010 to 2012, more firefighters were diagnosed with cancer than the previous 10 years combined. Latest studies are telling us that 1 out of every 3 firemen will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in time in their life. Those are very staggering numbers. And as Christina touched on earlier, during the 3-year study from 2011 to 2012, we did get the numbers. 1,551 uniformed employees right here in our state's capital, and 1 out of 14 are fighting cancer. The state average is 1 out of every 192 for the entire state of Ohio. But this is not just a large municipality problem. This isn't just large cities. Even our smaller departments are struggling. Violet Township in Pickerington has a 1 out of every 5 average. You go to places like Cleveland, you go to these volunteer departments, and they start rattling off names. Cancer is a very big problem in every department, big or small. Now, with that being said, we now know through education, we now know through studies what is occurring. We know what our bodies are doing, we know what our gear is not doing, and we know what we need to do to counter these efforts, these chemicals. We cannot change the environment. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be able to change the chemicals that are used, and we cannot control what calls come in as the fire service. We just go, we respond. But we now know what's happening. And by knowing what happens, we can now educate ourselves. Over the last 6 months, we've been traveling all over the state of Ohio preaching the 12 steps to a safer department. The things that we've been able to take from other departments in other countries who have had the same problem we do here in the state of Ohio are now seeing their cancer rates fall. And in the state of Ohio, it is our job as first responders to adapt to those, to create change. And it's through the education of a class called Firefighters and Cancer that we are changing a generation of firemen and firewomen, changing the way they think, changing the way they act, and hopefully providing them a safer future. And we're also changing the old habits of a lot of the guys who've been on their departments for 20 or 30 years. They may not have cancer now, but who's to say they won't in 10 more years? These are where the changes need to begin. Now, as Christina touched, we did talk about the University of Cincinnati study, and we're very fortunate to have that study. Because understanding what these cancers are, we can also help our departments as well as other departments start early recognition of these cancers. In most of these cases, when you go down a list of cancers, these are not cancers that have very high success rates, even with treatment. So the earlier we can get to them, the better off we are, and we're very thankful for those medical professionals. Unfortunately, cancer has had a 30-year head start in the fire service. And that is what we are up against now. We're 30 years behind. We need to act quickly, we need to act swiftly. And that is why we have decided to partner up and reach out for help from our state leaders. We cannot do this alone. As the fire department, we can affect very little. But when the state is all involved, we can get a much broader reach, and we can affect even those who are not right here in the city of Columbus. The fact is being a fireman is not just a uniform. It's not something we just put on every 3rd day, and that's what we are for that day. It's who we are. It's what we do. There is no clock in, no clock out. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And unfortunately, it's that affects our families. They're the ones that kiss us goodbye, tell us to have a nice day at work, and their hopes are they see us the next morning when we get off duty. Unfortunately, cancer's not giving all these families that chance. As the departments will begin to, or continue to educate and prevent, it'll also be up to this teamwork that we're going to now conjoin with the state to make sure that even those families who are already stricken, or the families that will continue to be stricken, now have a benefit, some way to help, some way to ease that pain. And I just want to thank Representative Hagan for joining me in this fight and everybody that's involved in this, and I appreciate your time today.